But this examination, that beforehand examination, is necessary. Otherwise, it's not really our own. We have to make things really our own, and this holds also for opinions. So I would say, when we adopt something, we should always examine it, even if it's a piece of fashion. Does it disfigure myself, or is it really an expression of beauty? And we must also in our outer forms become artistic in our clothing and trying to express ourselves. And adoption is probably the wrong thing. If I'm really unique, there's probably no other person on earth who really is exactly like I am. And so I must really be very careful if I adopt something just like this. I really must examine it, and in the terms of art, of way of dressing, I really should choose my own colors and find my own colors and find my own style, the lines, the cut of itself, and express myself this way. And that would be a quite different world from today. It would be much more exciting, much freer than what we have today, because by conforming to fashions and trends, we negate our own individuality and we become unfree. Of course, we do not necessarily notice this being chained into a conformity, but actually we are chained. We bind ourselves, and it is nowadays a question of freeing ourselves from those chains and try to become our own in everything we do. That's the way we speak, that's the way we dress ourselves, what clothes we wear. We are a far cry from that now, but it's definitely a way. Think of the music. If you have a song, or different musicians, pop musicians take, every person has a unique way of making you songs. You know immediately, this is a song by Michael Jackson. It's quite unique. It's quite different from what I know, some other artists. So the artists have become unique in what they do. That's why you recognize. It's why you listen on the radio and can say, oh, this one is Michael Jackson, or this one is Beethoven, this one is Mozart, or whatever, and or this is John Coltrane. You can distinguish that because they have expressed something in their music which is unique and which makes them identifiable. And the artists do it in their music, and the artists do it in their paintings. So we can easily go into a gallery and know, oh, this is a Van Gogh, and this is a Degas, and this is something else, and this is something else, and this is a David Hockney, because they have expressed something in a unique way which is their own and where we can easily recognize them. We normal mortals are very far from that, but I think that's an aim we have to go forward to, and which we have to try to reach. And it's a very exciting way. And as I want to just restate it, only becoming ourselves, then we can make our unique contribution to the community. Let us say the community in this term would be the whole humanity. Then I become one unique part which is absolutely necessary, indispensable for that community. If I would be like 2,000 other people exactly the same, I would be dispensable. I could be replaced by someone else. But I think there's something irreplaceable in the human being, and that we must develop.
Thank you, Brother Rainer. Dear listeners, you're listening to Breast Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail Message by Abdushin. And the topic for discussion tonight is individuality and community. And we are now live on YouTube as well as the blessedradio.org website. So please do join us there if you want to. You can see us on video there. So just to let my fellow colleagues know that you're live on YouTube. So yes, and of course, if you have any questions or comments, please do contact us on this number. If you're in UK, it is 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'll say that again. It's 079. In fact, I've got a call coming in right now, so I'll just see who it is. Hello, listener.
Yes, I'm listening. Robert Bridget.
Oh, I think this is an ad. Let me just put that.
What's
up.
that?
It's too much.
Oh my gosh.
I'll take them off.
No, they need to turn off the radio or the because
Let me just take
there
it
is feedback.
separately. Okay. Hello, listener. You want to go on the radio? Yes, we're on the radio. Okay, you're listening to the spiritual discussion show. Do you have anything? Are you listening to the radio now? Okay, all right. Let me pass you to someone. Okay. Apologies for that. That was not for us. So yes, you're listening to Blessed Radio, dear listeners, and this is the spiritual discussion show. The aim is to introduce you to the work in the light of truth, the Grail message, which is a spiritual knowledge of life. And the topic for discussion tonight is individuality and community. And just to repeat the number to contact us here, if you have any questions or comments, the number for UK is 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're contacting us from outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. So next question I'm going to put to Brother Femi. Brother Reiner said, it's talked about, how we're going to basically, we are meant to develop into these unique personal human beings who are essential, to make a contribution to this creation that we live in, or the earth that we are living in now. And I have a sort of and of course all we have talked about mostly right now what we are meant to contribute in a beneficial way, but as we know, on this earth there are all types of people, and so I will have a question from a listener. Let me just read that to you. That is, in the present day society prides itself on encouraging individuality, which has given rise to the increase of display or a lot of activities from the underworld. So, Brother Femi, can you say something about that? What about the rise of activities coming from the underworld through the encouragement of individuality?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Again, this, of course, as we know, is a spiritual discussion show. And so when one tries to explain a question such as this, some assumptions are made about what the listeners understand. So if you're talking about the underworld, one may rightly ask, what exactly do we mean by the underworld? And how is the underworld interfacing or integrated with this world that we live in, which is a big question in its own right. But I'm not going to attempt to deal with that now. I'm going to focus with the question from the perspective of individuality within the society that we live in here on earth. So what we need to take cognizance of is that there are norms, there are expectations that any society defines for those who live within that society. Within that framework that the society has defined, each individual is allowed to express themselves as long as they do not stand or they do not move outside of the framework. So the question now becomes one of what exactly is the framework, who defines the framework and how is it formed? So if I roll back to the 1920s, as an example, there was a standard of dressing that was acceptable within the society at the time. An English gentleman, for instance, would not be properly dressed if he did not have his bowler hat and his umbrella when he was going for a formal function. A lady would also not be properly dressed if she was not wearing a long frock with long sleeve hands and a high neck. That was the framework within which people operated. However, within that framework, people still expressed themselves in different ways. I could like a red-colored suit. Somebody else may prefer a white-colored suit, and so on and so forth. So the point that I'm trying to make is that there is a framework that we all operate within, and that framework still allows us to express our individuality. What the challenge is when the framework is being changed. Is the framework being changed for the betterment of the community as a whole, in a constructive, in an uplifting, and in a progressive manner? Or is the framework being defined in a way that could lead to destruction of the totality of the community? Because the framework has now become one of letting everybody have a go, letting everybody's passion, letting their desires, giving them a channel in which to vent that desire, which ultimately leads to absolute chaos. So 20 years ago, the government, for instance, might have said, within this community, anyone who is under the age of 21 is not allowed to have sex. If you do, it's a problem. You've violated that framework, and you have to face the consequences. Similarly, a few years or a few decades down the line, it's now changed to the age of 16 years old. Who knows, maybe in another 20, 30 years, it might be changed to 14 years old, and so on and so forth. So the question is the framework that humanity is defining for itself here on Earth, is it a framework that will indeed help those humans to align themselves with what is expected of their being from their creator as human spirits? Is the framework one that would help them to fulfill the purpose of their being here on Earth, which is to develop into a perfect human being? Or is it one that is likely to get them entrapped, similar to someone who decides to dabble with cocaine and becomes totally dependent on the cocaine, is totally unable to function like an independent, normal entity, because if the cocaine is missing, his life basically crumbles in front of him. Unfortunately, in today's world of anything goes, everything is acceptable, and there are very limited restrictions to how people are allowed to express their passion. We now find ourselves in a community where people are being dragged down, people are being exposed to experiences that is totally unbeneficial to them, experiences which those who are weak imbibe and begin to dabble with, and unfortunately that leads them down the slippery slope to destruction. So coming back to your original question, therefore, which was talking about community, individuality, freedom of expression. Indeed, a permissive society has exposed itself to very grave dangers where traits or tendencies that are not healthy, tendencies that are not uplifting, tendencies that one could say are actually fundamentally evil in nature, can easily be promoted. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in today, those kind of tendencies are the ones that are becoming more dominant. Parents are finding it very challenging to bring up their children. Teachers are finding it almost impossible to guide and provide a strict framework for children to develop within. And so we churn out all these half-baked adults that continue to perpetuate and hasten the decay that is happening within the society. And so one has to ask the question, where is all this going to lead to? When is all this going to come to an end? And your guess to the answer is as good as mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Femi. What you've been saying is a framework, Brother Ryan, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Brother Femi. The question of that listener before was such forms which become visible today of darker regions, or she called it the underworld, and I guess she means the dark regions which manifest themselves on Earth today. And of course they manifest themselves in music, in songs, and as you say, they are rather shocking and violent. I do not think that that such people are pursuing to become individual and become themselves, but as you said before, they express dark tendency, the excitement to be evil, to be dark. There's definitely an excitement to be evil, and many people find it more exciting to be evil, and we have those forms. Apart from, let us say, Lady Gaga, which I think is very much to shock and draw attention as much as she can, like Madonna probably does the same, so it is not really trying to express their individuality, but by way of a very shocking, dark way, which appeals to many people. I mean, that deprived way, no doubt, this complete stressing of sexuality and well, as you can see on their stage shows, that's designed, of course, to shock, to draw attention, and to draw masses. Now, you're saying, okay, there's a legal framework. Are you saying now we should forbid all that? Should we forbid Madonna or Lady Gaga to do their stage show, or to forbid such songs like, what was the one I heard this morning? Something like, oh, don't be shy, undress yourself. That was probably a message to a girl which didn't want to undress right away. That's in the top 10 right now. in German and English song. Probably you know it too. So can we legally forbid it? Would that be a way? That's my question to Femi.
Okay, I will answer your question in a fairly simple way. Back in the 70s, which was actually not that long ago, there was an artist, American rhythm and blues artist or soul artist actually, by the name of Donna Summer.
Oh yeah, I know her. Okay,
She
who doesn't know
released
her?
a single called Love to Love in the 70s. Practically every radio station, practically every television station banned that single as being obscene. Okay? So this was not something which the government had to make a law to ban that single, but the level of, for want of a better expression, moral standing that existed in the community at the time basically said this is not appropriate. Now, today, if a lady decides that she wants to go in her bikini to go walking along the streets, the chances is that she'll probably get away with it. Nobody would see it as being obscene. 20, 30 years ago, that would have been deemed to be indecent exposure. Maybe you could do that if you are at the seaside for obvious reasons, but today the standards are different. And with the way things are going, I think it's perfectly reasonable to project that in maybe a few decades' time, during the summer months, if someone decides that they want to go topless because they feel it is too hot and there is nothing wrong with them going topless, it will probably be allowed. Now, the issue is this. Yes, from the lady's point of view, she may genuinely feel that she's expressing her individuality and that there is absolutely nothing wrong with what she's doing, as a lot of ladies feel today with the way they dress, that it's not anybody's business the way they dress. It's up to them to choose what they want to do. However, there is the other side of the coin that says whatever you do as an individual within a community actually creates a ripple effect within that community. And whichever way you like to see it, whatever you think, the reality is it has an impact on the community. It has an impact in so many different layers, from the 6-year-old girl who sees an adult and thinks, oh, that's an interesting way of dressing, I want to start dressing like that as well, to the young teenage boy whose hormones are just beginning to break through, who sees what can be described as a sex object, and that creates a certain amount of lust or desires within him, which he begins to feed on, to perhaps an older man who may even be a married man, who, seeing that person, begins to think in a particular direction that he would never have thought of if he did not see that image that had been presented to him. So the question now still remains one of, is it okay to say anybody and everybody can do whatever they want to do, and it is therefore up to each individual within that society to close their eyes or to ignore what is happening or what they are seeing? Unfortunately, some people, well, I mean, I'm saying unfortunately, it's not a question of being unfortunate or not. It's just the reality that some people are much stronger than others. You explained earlier on about the homogeneity that is being created today through fashion, through music. Everybody basically wants to follow the same trend. And so it is very easy to, in quotes, corrupt the society through lack of control, through lack of awareness, and through unfortunate derogatory actions or activities. And like you rightly said, the man of today, the human beings of today, are much more sensitized towards things that are likely to debase them. That excites us more. We see it as being trendy. We see it as being cool. We see it as being fashionable. And so people tend to gravitate more towards that. And all the things which are more likely to be seen as being ennobling in nature would normally be seen as being boring. And so you have to ask yourself, what is going on here? And the answer is actually quite simple. The reality is the darkness continues to take the upper hand. The darkness that was here at the time of Jesus, that offered to give Jesus the totality of creation or of the world, if Jesus would bow before him, that same darkness continues to operate in the world of humans today. Unfortunately, because we are so deep in it, because we are so steeped in it, we cannot even recognize it anymore. And so the vast majority of mankind continues to go down that slippery slope to eternal damnation, to destruction. And so it is only the few that have truly found the strength within themselves to rip themselves away from all these derogatory and deceptive bright lights that leads to nowhere else but doom. It is only those few that are likely to find their way back to salvation. Unfortunately, the lawmakers, the demands of the society, and the expectations that is being imposed or being allowed from the individual now leaves a lot to be desired. And so the community or the society continues to decay to a point where the only thing that would end up happening is it's going to collapse on itself. And that's inevitable with the trend that we have at the moment. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it was very long. So in short, you would say we should have stricter laws and enforce them.
That's the only way to really help humanity today. It's like a 5-year-old child who does not really know what is right from what is wrong, and he's testing boundaries. The 5-year-old child has two aunties. One of them is strict, the other one is liberal. The 5-year-old child quickly gets to understand that, oh, this auntie is going to allow me to do whatever I want to do, and in the process, that 5-year-old is damaged. Whereas the other one recognizes that this auntie is not going to allow me to do this, comports himself appropriately. He might not fully understand the benefits that he's getting from that level of discipline that is being imputed on him, but over time, as he matures, it becomes clearer. Whereas the other 5-year-old that has been damaged, the effort to ultimately get him or her back onto the right path may actually be a lost cause because it's not going to happen anymore. And in the unfortunate thing with us human beings, especially with a development from a spiritual perspective, we were given a very long rope to develop ourselves, to make all the mistakes that we could ever want to make, and to find our ways back from all those mistaken paths that we've been following, such that within the allotted time for us to achieve that level of maturity that we need to move back to the spiritual, within that time we would have attained it. The reality is we have frittered away the vast bulk of the time. And so the limited time that we now have left to be able to get ourselves together and actually save ourselves, for want of a better expression, is minute compared to what we've already wasted. And so the truth of the matter is, to truly help, there now needs to be much stricter rules that we have to be guided by. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. If anything, things are being ripped apart even further, unfortunately.
Thank you, Brother Femi. Actually, I've got a question from a listener which really sort of fits in very well with what you've been saying, Brother Femi, there. And so this is going to go to Brother Gregory. Brother Femi talked about a framework, of how things are meant to be, and obviously the way we've been doing things, the framework seems to be thrown out of the window. So the next obvious question is there any help for us? So this is the question I'm going to read from the listener now. Is there an unseen community upon which an individual may call upon in times of need? Likewise, are there centers born out of wrong use of the power in creation by individuals or communities that are also unseen as such, and that may have profound effects upon the individual and thereby a community such as humanity? So let me read this again. It's a very long one. As I said, the way I look at it is about, is there any help for us? So here we go. So this is the question. Is there an unseen community upon which an individual may call upon in times of need? Likewise, are there centers born out of the wrong use of power in creation by individuals or communities that are also unseen, and as such which may have profound effects upon an individual and thereby a community, such as the humanity? So that's to Brother Gregory.
Thanks for that particular question. It will be good to start from the statements that Rafami made, in which he talked about the concept of a framework. The concept of a framework is so important to understanding what's the individual or the community is there for. The framework one is referring to must be the framework through which every individual, every community came into existence. This particular framework must not be devoid of nature through which we all came into existence. That framework one may refer to as the laws of nature through which we came into existence, or in a broader sense, the laws of creation. It is through these laws of creation or the laws of nature that we have come as individuals in order to experience. And after our experiences, depending on how we have experienced and have come to recognition, depending on how we have come from being unconscious in our natures to consciousness, we are then permitted to return to that larger community back home, which one may refer to as paradise. So it is not that things happen in an arbitrary way. That could never be, because nature itself is not arbitrary. For when one examines the laws through which all has come into existence or into being, one will find that within these laws or within this framework, there are always helps, which helps have been placed at specific points, helps in one's well-being, that will ensure that man is able to make the right decisions at specific times as an individual or as a group. So the community on the individual has never been alone. Where an individual to listen to his or her intuitive perception, there will be guidance as to how to proceed. No individual will expect a newborn baby to be exposed to all sorts of dangers. Dangers not only physically, but dangers in the non-physical environment, which one may refer to as the interior environment or animistic environment. Dangers which can be avoided. However, what has always happened is that in discussions in which rules or laws are formulated for the community, the thought of one's intuition is put away and say, I am free to express myself as I wish. Now, consider the scenario where everyone speaks its own language because it wants to be unique. That means A speaks his own language, B speaks, and as many people on earth speak their own individual language, how can one then understand another? That is chaos. But there is a universal language. Which language is what gave the opportunity through which we exist? That is the language that we need to understand. That is the language that gives us individuality, but individuality in the context that those innate talents which have been implanted within us come to fruition through interaction with the others. Not that we can just go naked and we say all sorts of things because we want to express ourselves. But the family made a salient point about things in which the darkness comes in. The darkness only comes in when the human spirits in their indolence allow things like that to occur without comparing, without sensing the will that has granted all the opportunity to exist. As long as the human spirit is alert to the demands that creation has made upon it, it won't go wrong. But as long as it shuts out all the fine impression that touches its soul, through which the spirit expresses itself, then we will have a scenario where evil is minimized, and that which is good is maximized. That is what is expected. Not that one can do as they like and they expect to pass. To pass only means that those innate talents which have been granted them come to fruition, else it will be failure. Or is it possible to allow those fine innate talents which have been to be ignored and arbitrary actions taken which will suppress those innate talents? The problem here is how we care to develop these talents. Therefore, it is necessary to always, as with everything, to compare and ask oneself, are these in accordance with the laws of nature or with the laws of creation through which we are come into existence? These laws of nature is what man needs to know, such that is able to map its journey successfully back to paradise that it left as an unconscious spirit gem. Success only means that is able to go back to paradise as a conscious or as a self-conscious spirit gem, knowing of its abilities and capabilities and helping in the further development of creation. That is all there is. All others are just transient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Gregory. You covered quite a bit there. You talked about the natural laws and then also the, let's say, you could say the lifespan of man or the journey of man, is the better word I would say. Starting in paradise and then coming as unconscious spirit germ and the aim of becoming conscious and then landing on this earth and experiencing on the earth. And obviously the final goal is to return back to the paradise and being a mature spirit. So that's quite a big journey. What I'm going to say, dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio, the spiritual discussion program on Tuesday night. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail message by Shin, which is spiritual knowledge of life. And the topic we are discussing tonight, it is individuality and community. And we'd love you to join with your questions or comments. You can call us, text us, or communicate by WhatsApp. The number for UK is 079 444 31366. That's 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. That's for UK. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. Brother Ryan, I'm going to move on to you now.
Can I just answer freely
Yes.
to what has been said before?
Yes, yeah,
So-
go ahead.
So you save your questions
Okay, yes, okay
in
then.
case
All right.
in case you're running out. Okay, I
Right.
just want to talk about the forms which come into existence today. The forms, and we know we are faced with incredible, ugly, deprived things.
I think you
Shocking
mean-
thing.
Just to stop
Sorry?
you, just to correct you, it's not deprived, depraved.
Oh, depraved. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
deprived
I
meaning
apologize.
poor, but depraved meaning, let's say, not. Well, I was going to use the word nasty, but it's worse than that. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So we have those depraved forms,
Yeah.
and most of them, we can almost say all ugliness which we are faced today in today's society has its root not in individuality, but in the desire to draw attention to yourself. So it's a kind of envy. I want to be seen. I want to draw attention. And one can, that's almost with every ugly thing. If we should really apply our sense of beauty to all those things in order to judge those forms which come about. Now, ugliness, there's almost every aspect today. You look at the shape of cars, at the form of cars, I don't find them beautiful anymore. The aggressive faces, pompous, displaying the wealth, everyone perceives it like this, or should perceive it in a similar way. But they're also very beautiful things. They're very beautiful songs being written, unbelievably beautiful pieces out of heaven, almost. And there were very beautiful artistic currents in the 20th and even now in the 21st century, where artists really placed beautiful objects into this world. Today we have a world which hates the beautiful and fosters that and promotes the ugly thing. You have that in fashion, you have that the unnatural thing. It's against nature. Beauty is always according to nature, and it's always natural. So a flower is beautiful, the flower. Nature provides the best examples for beauty. An apple tree in blossom is a beautiful thing. Now, if a human being tries to develop itself at the core, we are spiritual and we are not dark. And we would develop beautiful outer forms if we try to develop our naturality. But if, of course, we are more attracted to dark things than to death, then of course we take a t-shirt and paint a skull on top of the t-shirt, and go into the museum and we find skulls made with diamonds today in museums, and all kinds of depraved things today, like people hanging themselves up by their skin on hooks. That's all in the arts, and but it's never in the sense of developing the natural, going towards the beautiful. And we must always keep in mind, paradise is absolute radiant beauty, and only beauty is the right thing, and only in beauty we really free our individuality. The dark things which we pursue, and when we make dark forms, like, let us say, the song has been mentioned, Love to Love You Baby by Donna Summer. I read recently an interview by Donna Summer, and she says this song persecuted her till today, and she could not free herself from that song. She was cast into a dye of a sex symbol, making a song for a pornographic club, in fact. And she tried to free herself. She made much. She's kind of a respectable artist. I don't like her too much, but I listened then after that interview. I listened to some of her songs. She's a respectable artist, but the repercussion of that one song which she made in Germany, and here it was allowed, and here it was a #1 hit. The effect was devastating, and she's suffering from the repercussion. And we who knows the Grail message know that there's a law behind it, which is the law of reciprocal action, which where she's already suffering today from that song, and which really attracts attention from her much better work and her other records. Now, this is about individuality, and we must really distinguish between the beautiful and the ugly. And behind the ugly, of course, is darkness and trying to draw attention to yourself. And I think that holds probably true for Lady Gaga, and I wouldn't call her an individual. I would call her someone who is given to darkness, but that might not be quite right. I do not know her too well. The other question is now, how do communities, groups, and associations, case, and etc. form? Now, there's another law which we know. Communities form in a quite natural way and are a consequence of the law of attraction of homogeneity. of homogeneity species. People who have something in common, and that which they have in common, that acts as a cohesive force, and they form groups. Now there are all kinds of groups which form all the time. Some then, and those cohesive elements can be of any species, of any kind. For example, love for the arts will result in kinds of, let's say, a society for art appreciation, or a cultural club or something. A love for literature might persuade someone to join a literary association. All those things are formed under the influence of the law of attraction of homogeneous species. So, and the same is for castes, and in the initial sense at least. And that does not mean they should be so rigid as today the case. They should allow going, because people develop and change, and they should go into another caste, like the Indian system. But we have all kinds of associations, all kinds of groups, and all kinds of communities. So, and we must be aware that those form under the law of attraction of homogeneity, and that what they have in common, those species they have in common, they exert a cohesive force. So it's a quite natural thing. It's under the influence of that law that those groups form. And that's I just want to say. And sometimes the big problem now we have today is with communities like, let us say, United States or England or Germany, is that under the influence of the ideology, now I think I come really to a very poisonous thing. This is the ideology of the postmodernism, or the politically correct idea, which tries to keep societies completely open. And there's an influx of people who might harmonize, but also there can be an influx of people who are completely of a different species. Let us say have a different religion. Of course, that religion, let us say Muslims, why not? They form a community, or the Turkish in Germany form communities very closely knit and separate themselves from the community. So our leaders must become aware of what they do when they have one body, one society, and open it up, open the frontiers to influx of elements which can be hostile and do damage in that other community. Then you get clashes between different communities, and you get communal strife or even communal violence, which many societies now suffer under. For example, the Indian one very much, but also our societies. So we have to keep that in mind. Unfortunately, our politicians do not know about this law of attraction of homogeneity, but it is under the influence of this law that such subpopulation, subgroups form, very closely knit together, and they might reject completely the framework of the host society. Like we have Arab criminal clans which are completely outside the law, which challenge the police in some cities openly and say, well, you cannot enforce the law because we are stronger and we are better organized than you, because the police is always hampered by 200 million laws which impede them to act efficiently. And they act over borders quite easily. They use the borders between Germany and other countries, and they are closely knit society which make robberies in broad daylight. In one of the biggest shops in Berlin was burgled. It's like being Harrods. The equivalent of Harrods was being burgled by Arab clans, which are these enormous families, and they of course are homogeneous. They are Arabs, they are Muslims, and they are a special type of Arabs, I must say. I do not remember, I read recently an article about them. And then we have a society where those different groups, of course, develop frictions because the homogeneity between other groups in the society is very low there, and where there is non-homogeneous elements, they create repulsion. And we have a lot of repulsion today, which shows itself in the voting things. So we definitely, in order to answer that question, a little bit try to find a light in this very difficult situation which we have today. We must look at this law of attraction of homogeneity, under which influence any kind of group, any kind of grouping forms.
Thank you, Brother Rainer. Thank you. Dear listeners, you're listening to Blessed Radio. It's the spiritual discussion program, and we're also live streaming on YouTube. If you go to Blessed Radio, search on YouTube Blessed Radio 1, and our program is under the name Pro Sard and the Grail Message. That's PRO, Pro Sard and the Grail Message. And as you know, the aim of the show is to introduce you to the work in the light of truth, the Grail Message. And if you want to get some more information on the Grail Message or get a copy yourself, you can go to this website. You can look elsewhere too, but this website we know you can find it, which is www.grailmessage.com. That's www.grail, G-R-A-I-L, message, M-E-S-S-A-G-E.com. Now, Brother Rainer, I would like to follow on from what you have said. You said the politicians are not aware of the law of attraction of homogeneity, and so we have, let's say, in Western Europe, mass migration has occurred, and different cultures or people of different let's say, very different cultures than or even their practices, let's say, which does not align with the practices of the indigenous people in those countries. So they've let them in, and they're in mass numbers. So now it has all happened, and their ghettos have been formed, and those groups have separated themselves into their own areas, and they're able to even, like you said, bypass the law because they can cross borders, not like the law can do, or the country police can do, and the police, you said, also restricted by the laws of the country as well. So can anything be done now? Because it's like you let the genie out of the bottle, and the genie is now free to do what he likes. Can anything be done about this, or is just we got to just suffer the consequences of these things? Because the people are here now.
Okay, I think I leave that. I just answer a little bit, and then we pass that question around because It's a very good question. What can be done in that situation? Which we have now. Definitely, I think we have to take care of one very important rule, which is also specified in the Grail Message. I try to find the quote if I've got it, otherwise. Okay. One rule to keep in mind is always, I quote it now from the Grail Message, at your desire you are allowed to wander through the creations, thereby becoming self-conscious, but in so doing you must not harm others in order to satisfy your personal desires. I think if any government would say, if you want to live here, you must subscribe to something similar. You can do what you want and what you desire, and you can enjoy creation, but you must not harm others in order to satisfy your personal desires. That rule must be above everything. Even a Muslim who thinks, I've the ultimate religion, no prophet comes after me, and I have the right to kill any unbeliever if he's not converting to the highest of religion. He must allow the freedom of another person to go his own way, and he must not harm another person by, let us say, trying to blow him up, to say it in a very primitive way. Um, so I think that would be one way out if we would hammer, if our governments would adopt this thing as the highest rule, and then we would live together, and then we would see it will sort itself out, I believe, in some time. We are in a mess, and but at least perhaps also no communal strife and no communal violence. All communal violence will be stopped in that way, because it allows the others to be different. And this is so basic, so principle. Another human being has the right to go his own way, has even the duty to go his own way. No one can force him to adopt anything. And he can do it as long as he does not harm anyone else. And there is no exception to it. And I think if our societies come to that point and say, all societies come to that point and say, who does not obey that rule, who does not subscribe to that rule, and says, oh, it's in contradiction with my, with the beliefs of my group, or with the beliefs of with the beliefs of my group and with what we hold for true, then it does not matter. Then this person must simply leave the country, and we must be rigorous in that, because he will harm other people. And that's a very basic rule. I think everyone can understand it, and we can make it clear. I think one can make it clear to anyone that a person is given, a human being is given the power to make choices and the capability to make choices and to choose his own way. And God then, that must be then respected, because if a capability has been given to us, then we must apply it. Otherwise it is against, we are acting against God. And so I would say that would be one first step. You can do whatever you like, but on your way you must not harm others in order to satisfy your personal desires or your personal objectives. So that would be one way out, one first step, and I think it would improve things already. It would not solve all problems, but we can only make little steps in the right direction. So now I think we can go to the others, what they have to say.
Thank you, Brother Rainer. Yes, anybody else would like to come in? Would like to contribute? Okay. What I'm going to say next is, any of my colleagues, is there anything else you'd like to read from the Grail message for the listeners, which you think would be relevant about tonight's topic, individuality and the community? I know Brother Rainer has said a quote from the message there, but has anybody else got anything to about that?
There is a bit which one would like to read.
Yes, go ahead.
It doesn't seem to have direct bearing, but in a higher dimension, it is very pertinent.
Yes,
and
please.
It's taken from the lecture Errors. And it says, let us first of all consider creation. Imagine that all life therein, no matter in what part it is found, is of two kinds only. The one kind is self-conscious, and the other unconscious of itself. It is of the utmost value to observe these two different categories. This is connected with the origin of man. The differences also give the stimulus to further development to the apparent struggle. The unconscious is the basis of all conscious. but its composition is of exactly the same nature. To become conscious is progress and development for the unconscious, which through association with the conscious is continually being stimulated also to attain to this consciousness. In the process of developing downwards, the first creation itself brought successive three great basic divisions. As uppermost and highest in its spiritual, the primordial creation, followed by the denser and thus also gradually heavier sphere of animistic substance. Lastly, as the lowest, and because of its great density, the heaviest still follows the great realm of matter, which, severing itself from primordial creation, has gradually sunk down. Through this, there finally remained as the uppermost only the primordial spiritual substance, because in its pure nature it embodies what is lightest and most luminous. It is the often mentioned paradise, the crown of all creation. With the sinking down of what becomes denser, we already touch upon the law of gravitation, which is not only anchored in matter, but has an effect on all creation, from the so-called paradise down to us. The law of gravitation is of such decisive importance that everyone should hammer it into his mind, for it is the main lever in the whole of evolution and process of development of the human spirit. I have already said that this gravitation applies not only to earthly consistency, but also works uniformly in those parts of creation which earthmen can no longer see, and which they therefore simply call the beyond. For a better understanding, I must still divide the world of matter into sections, into ethereal and gross matter. Ethereal matter is that matter which cannot become visible to the physical eye owing to its different nature, and yet it is still matter. The so-called beyond must not be confused with the longed-for paradise, which is purely spiritual. The spiritual must not be taken as something to do with thoughts, but the spiritual is a consistency, just as the animistic and the material are each a consistency. Therefore, now, this ethereal matter is simply called the beyond, because it lies beyond earthly vision. Gross matter, however, is this side, that is earthly, which on account of its similar species become visible to our gross material eyes. Man should get rid of the habit of regarding everything that are invisible to him as also incomprehensible and unnatural. Everything is natural, even the so-called beyond and paradise, which are still an immense distance from it. Now, just as here our physical body is sensitive to its surrounding of a homogeneous nature, which it can therefore see, hear, and feel, so it is exactly the same in those parts of creation whose consistency is not like ours. The ethereal man in the so-called beyond feels, hears, and sees only his homogeneous ethereal environment. The higher spiritual man again can only feel his spiritual environment. Thus, it happens that many an earth dweller now and then already sees and hears also the ethereal world with his ethereal body, which he bears within, before the separation from the gross material earthly body takes place through physical death. There is absolutely nothing unnatural in this. Side by side and cooperating with the law of gravitation is also no less valuable law of homogeneous species. I've already touched upon this in saying that one species can recognize the same species. The proverbs, birds of a feather flock together, and like father, like son, seem to have been sent from the primordial law. Together with the law of gravitation, it swings throughout creation. In addition to those already mentioned, there is a third primordial law in creation, the law of reciprocal action. The effect of this law is that man must reap what he has once sown unconditionally. He cannot reap wheat where he sowed rye, nor clover where he sowed thistles. In the ethereal world, it's exactly the same. In the end, he will not be able to reap kindness where he felt hatred, nor joy where he nourished envy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail message by Abdul Sheen. And Brother Gregory was reading a section from the lecture Errors, which covered quite a lot about the natural laws which the Grail message talks about, and also let's say the different planes within this creation that we live. So this book gives a lot of details about the world we live in, and how it works together, which is through the natural laws. So thank you, Brother Gregory, for going through that, and we of course encourage you to examine it with your own self to find out more about the life that we live in and the world we live in. So that you can go to this website if you would like to know, get a copy of the Grail message. I'll just give you this website, www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, G-R-A-I-L, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic for tonight we're discussing is individuality and community. And we of course you can listen to us on the website, which is blessradio.org, or you can also go to YouTube, look for Blessed Radio 1, and search there for Brother Sard or Bro Sard and the Grail message. So, Brother Femi, we've heard a lot of very interesting things being said, and about individuality and community. And what I wanted to ask you is how this sort of community has come about. So let me give you an example. For example, let's say, I know it's not so common nowadays, we have a king, and say in some country they have a king, or it used to be like that. Every country like that had a king, and he has his subjects or citizens, and then basically everything the king said, that's what would happen, and all the people in the community would have to listen to him and follow him. And of course his aim was to look after his people. So my question there is, how did that king? I mean, some people used to say that is through divine uh, ordinance. That's how or divine guidance. That's how the king is being chosen, and and everybody just has to bow to that. So, is that how it works? That somehow he's chosen, or is it, um, and what qualifies that king to be the king? What quality brings him to be the king? Is it somebody the strongest person in the community? Or somehow he has a respect of the people around him somehow. And the reason I'm asking that is, because we talk about individuality and then the community, and so really, how does it happen that some individual can become this leader? And does that mean all the other ones who are not leaders, in this position at least, have to become the servants and just have to express themselves under this person's rule? So I know I'm giving an example of sort of an old type of world, which there's only a few countries that act in this way. But let's say we're going back into history just to understand it, and then we can probably come back to the future at the present time and understand today as well. So yeah, Brother Femi, can you tell us more about how this community sort of started or developed with the king and his people?
Okay. Thanks for the question. If we actually look back into recent times, when I say recent times, I'm talking maybe the last 200 years, probably even 150 years. The concept of nations, of countries, as we know it today, actually did not exist. What did exist was groupings of people that had a very high level of homogeneity amongst themselves, and they basically had their own norms and their own standards, which those within that community would tend to adhere to. And so fast forward, I don't know, back to 100 years ago, when in recent times the British government, as we know it, was the superpower of the world, and they basically went far and wide to conquer various peoples, and for ease of administration, for ease of demarcation, they basically created all these concepts of countries as we know it now, where people who had absolutely no homogeneity with each other were basically bundled together within a geographical territory that was given the label of a country name. And so the question or the issue then still comes about that artificially created entity still had to be governed somehow. Obviously, at the time when the British were the rulers, it was a question of brute force. Whoever had the biggest guns and whoever was the most ruthless basically won the day. And he kept onto power by suppressing. And then, of course, over time, when the need to so-called independence, the clamp independence started, it then gradually shifted to the concept that we have today of democratic government, which again was very much nurtured within the American society when America decided to break away from the Brits, and they came up with this concept of one man, one vote. So democracy as we know it today is actually something which is still relatively young. The vast majority of the existence of humanity on Earth, communities were not run based on democracies. They were not. As you rightly described, there was, generally speaking, a ruler, a king, and the king basically would generally hand over to his own offspring, who would continue to rule that groupings of people. And so, to kind of like wrap this up, should we have huge nations, huge cities, as we currently have in today's world? The simple answer is no. It is not healthy. It creates the worst. It brings out the worst in peoples, and so you don't have to travel far. It doesn't matter which country in the world you are. Go to the large cities, go to the smaller ones, go to the villages. The smaller the grouping within the community, the more sanity generally exists there, the more refined and narrower is the level of tolerance within the smaller communities, and therefore the greater the level of homogeneity that you would find within such groupings. Is that the way to go? Definitely. Of course, there would be interactions between the different communities. That has always been the nature of humanity from time immemorial. You know, we're natural-born travelers. We exchange ideas, we exchange products, we exchange views. But fundamentally, the community retained its identity, retained its rules, and they progressed. So, as I've explained, what we now know as the community, which generally tends to be fairly large cities, and where the rulers have been elected by some so-called democratic process, is that really the best way to govern the community? I think if we're to go by the experience of the last 200 years, or even in recent times, if we were to go by what has happened in the last 20, 30 years, where the Americans have decided that they wanted to impose a democratic government in a number of countries, the experience has gone horribly wrong. So again, that should be asking the simple question: is the democratic system the most appropriate way for everybody, or for anybody for that matter? But these are very deep questions which, depending on what one's political views are, you know, they can become very volatile topics of discussion. But what I would like to round up with is basically taking a view that the smaller the communities are, the more homogeneous the communities are, the more sane they are likely to be, the more progressive they are likely to be, and the process of a leader for such communities to emerge would be a much more natural process, whereby the leader of the community, as has been in times gone by, would generally be the wisest person, the most knowledgeable, the most endowed, that has a much greater level of insight than the others. And so through the being of that leader, the others would naturally gravitate to him and would naturally seek and benefit from his own counsel. And that actually was how kings and leaders have evolved in times gone by. But of course, the paradigm in today's world is of a totally different nature. So we can't change it overnight. Evolution continues, and we hope, one can only hope, that in time, the need for smaller groupings of people for so many different reasons, um, um, for actual physical management, economic growth, and so on and so forth, will become clearer, and hopefully countries would tend to structure themselves more along those paths. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, I was not sure you were answering it at the beginning, but now I can say yes, because you came, I was starting with kings and the people, and then you started with the current time, and then you went back to the old times at the end. So thank you for that. Yeah. So actually, from what I'm getting from what you're saying, really, that the things were better in the, well, maybe not the right way to say it, but the olden times, the people, the way we were ruled was, let's say, more in accordance with how it's supposed to be, rather than the, because we always think the modern world is progressing and is, new things are being developed, so we are advancing. But from what you have said, really, even though we have a new system which supposedly is supposed to serve the people better, which is democracy, it actually doesn't really work, because at the end of the day, you really need a wise person at the top of the tree, and not just anybody what people think, have voted just by the majority that this is the one who should rule. And then, because without mentioning any names, we know even in the current time, people elect people who are not necessarily, let's say, they don't even know how to talk to someone in a decent manner. It's, as I say, I don't need to mention too much name about that, but that's what people have elected, and I think he's the best person for their country. And he might have good ability in something, but the way he acts with people is definitely not right. So, anybody with an ounce of decency would not accept that sort of person. So, what we need is a wise person, really, in every country. So maybe I will ask that to Brother Gregory. Brother Gregory, I know Brother Femi is saying that we hope that things will turn around and there'll be smaller groups of people in the community, and they'll be led by wise people. So I want to ask Brother Gregory, can that really happen? And with the the humanity of today, that because it's there's such a mass of people, and it looks like we've gone so far astray, which, like with the principle that Brother Reiner was talking about, that we are free to fulfill our desires as long as we do not harm others. And this principle, I will say every country or every people is mostly concerned about what is in our interest. They don't think of it in a very global manner. So do you think that man can turn himself round himself, or somebody has to intervene to bring this world to order, and it can be brought to order even? That's to Brother Gregory.
Thanks. The man who is wise is the one who understands the laws through which he himself and others came into existence, and abide by these laws. For others who are slowly maturing, they themselves may become wise in due course, when through their activities, the reciprocal action that they receive makes them go through experiences that will make them change for the better. With such development, the man of today will then get to that extent where, in all naturalness, whoever they choose as their leader will be chosen from insight, not arbitrariness. Therefore, yes, it is possible, but it might take quite some time.
Thank you, Brother Gregory. We're just coming to the end of our show now. We've got 5 minutes to go, so I'm going to ask Brother Rainer, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Or
Yes, I know it's very difficult question which have been asked right now, and I just perhaps like to add something to what Brother Femi said. What has been done when the borders have been drawn on the drawing board of the countries, of course, they didn't take into consideration the law of homogeneity. And the borders, if borders had to be drawn, because in many countries there were no borders. I think between the tribes, let us say in Nigeria, the big tribes, there were no borders as far as I know. I mean, perhaps someone can put me right there if that was different. But the border itself is an invention or something introduced, and sometimes we have borders, of course, which Brother Femi said, where different people are grouped together and which must result in strife. Or some people have been left without a country. For example, the Kurds, as far as I know, I've talked recently one, and he said, well, we have no country, I have no home, because my country is, part of my people live in Turkey, another part lives in the northern part of Syria, and another part lives in Iran. And that's, of course, an untenable position. And Turkey doesn't want to give up any land to those ones. The Iranians don't want to give up any land for the Kurds. The Iraq government doesn't want to give up anything. You see suddenly egoism where almost all countries collude to keep the Kurds deprived from a country of their own. I personally think they have a right to call some ground on this earth, on this globe, their own home country. And it seems almost impossible today with that egotism that any country would give up some land and say, okay, Kurds, you can have your own country, you can do what according to your own character and how you want to be ruled, and can rule yourself. But we have thousands of similar questions where things have been grouped together or torn asunder. That's also the case where the law of homogeneous species, the attraction of homogeneous species has not been observed by the people who drew the borders. And one can only hope that people become aware of this law, and this law is even fought bitterly today by the political correctness idea, which say there is no such thing as a people. Of course there are such things as a people. They have a completely different character, and the Turks are different from the Kurds, and they are different from other Arab people further south. And so we have to reckon with different cultures, with people having a different character, and we have to take that into consideration when we think. And we cannot say simply a border cannot be moved anymore or changed anymore. And I think a big thing today is to get away from the very egotistic thing. I don't want to lose any square meter of my country because it's Turkey, and unfortunately there live Kurds in the other side, and on the other end of the country, and I'm never give that up. But it's the prominent thinking today, and so we live in a very difficult situation. But I think in all those things is making little step-by-step advances and taking those laws into consideration, and with boundaries and borders. And if there are different societies, there are of course tribes, there are states, there are civil societies. These are all different things. But we must take the law of homogeneity into consideration when we try to rearrange the gross material structures with what the law of homogeneity dictates. I think it is all getting the gross material structures and the gross material laws and organization in line with what the law of homogeneity demands. So, okay, it's 10 o'clock now.
Yes,
I think
10 o'clock in Germany, but 9 o'clock in UK. Yes, thank you.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
It's all right.
Yes.
It's okay. So thank you, Brother Rainer. Yes, dear listeners, we have come to the end of our show tonight, and the next presenter, Brother Sayom, is in the studio. He'll be starting very soon. So I want to say thank you very much, everyone, dear listeners, for listening to us. I would like to ask my colleagues to say goodbye, starting with Brother Rainer, please. Anything you'd like to say to our listeners?
No, I'm looking forward to the program next week, and I hope I see all the listeners will participate again, and perhaps even a few more. And
yes.
A simple goodbye and a good time till next week.
Thank you. And now that you mentioned that next show, the topic for next week is living with uncertainty. That's the topic for next week. So, Brother Femi, please, anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
Just to wish everyone a peaceful evening, and to constantly bear in mind that what ultimately matters is your real spiritual being, and not the material distractions that we all have to go through on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you very much. And Brother Gregory, please, anything you'd like to say?
Just wishing everyone a beautiful week.
Thank you. And this is Brother Sard, dear listeners. Thank you again for listening to us. And please do join us next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. And the topic will be living with uncertainty. So I'm going to hand over to Brother Sayom in a moment. Brother Sayom, your show is called Spiritual Consciousness Show. Is there anything, the topic, do you have a topic or anything particular?
Well, the topics are, the topic, I do have a topic, but more time the topic is more fluid. So last Tuesday we were talking about Rasta, but in a way where I approached it very differently to what is usually the approach, very non-religious and into the spiritual esoteric realities of what it is, and the difference between intellectual knowledge and spiritual knowledge, you know.
Okay.
So to this evening, I'm gonna recap on a few things points I was making, and then I'm gonna go into you see, a lot of us will talk about the system and we want to change.
Yes.
And I'm gonna be talking about really the difference between effects and causes. And if you attack the effects, then you may make certain changes, but if you don't deal with the thought patterns, the behind the construction of those effects, then the same thing happens again. So it's an internal thing that we come to realize, because a lot of us deal with we look at effects and don't understand causes. There's no effect without a cause. There's no cause without an effect. And if you really want to change anything, you have to change it at the cause level. You see what I mean? So I'm going to be talking a bit about that. And